Welcome to In Context. This is the War Report. My name is Ken McDermott Rowe.
I'm Gus Cantavero.
And joining us today is Marchand McDermott Rowe, our military affairs commentator. Welcome, Marchand.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with Syria today. Hillary Clinton wants a war in Syria to overthrow the Assad government in the worst way, and she organized a Friends of Syria party in Tunis a couple days ago. And the party didn't quite turn out as she'd hoped. She didn't get the authorization to go ahead to invade Syria.
I like that we call it a party.
Party. And it's notable that Syria was not invited to its own party, nor were the leading opposition groups that we fund and are grooming to take over the country. But where does that leave United States' efforts to overthrow Assad?
Well, I find the whole concept of Friends of Syria, it's kind of like Nazis for Jews. You know, it really doesn't. It's kind of weird because here's this institution that we're putting together to topple the, presumably anyway, the national government of Syria. But I think right now where this leads us is the neighbors, the Arab neighbors, they want to topple Assad, but they don't really want to get their hands dirty because they know the decision to topple Assad is very unpopular with their own people. Their own people see Assad as, yeah, he's a tyrant, but he's our tyrant. Kind of like Saddam, he's a dictator, but he's our dictator. Kind of like the way the Americans view Bush. Yeah, he's a jerk, but he's our jerk. Would we like the Chinese coming in and kicking him out? No. So the Arab nations like the idea of removing Assad through subterfuge. Now that it might actually have to become overt, they're backing down. So I think it's putting a much more of an onus on the U.S., the U.K., Israel, and France and our allies.
Although we officially aren't even arming the people who were trying to overthrow the Assad regime, actually we know there's something going on in there. There's a Syrian National Army that we funded, we train, we equip, operating in with our ally Turkey on the border of Syria. We know that there are reports that there are Qatar and British special forces assisting the fighters in Syria. So there's a lot more going on there than the corporate media seems to be putting out.
Well, yeah, and additionally, the Russians have sent in to Syria their elite SOBR, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, police special forces into Syria. They've also sent in their Navy. They have the Admiral Kuznetsov, a Russian aircraft carrier, in Syria. So they're supplying them with intelligence.
With the Russians moving in, is this shaping up like something like Spain in the 1930s, where Germany was fighting through surrogates to take over, to support one side, and Russians were supporting the other side, where Syria will become a battlefield between U.S., NATO on one side and Russia on the other?
I think it's going to become more overt because this is much more shaping up to be much more like World War I. On the one hand, you have the Russians, the Syrians, and the Iranians on the other side, and the Chinese, of course, and the North Koreans by extension. On the other side, you have the United States, NATO, and Israel. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that if we decide to invade Syria, Iran has already sent in 15,000 special forces. Now just grasp that number for a second. 15,000. That's not a handful of guys you can ship in overnight. 15,000 troops. So it's very clear that if we went in a very overt fashion, Iran would declare war. Iran would get involved. Then by extension, Russia would have to declare war because they have a mutual defense treaty with the Iranians. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, dragging the Chinese and the North Koreans into the fight as well.
And this time there's a problem at the United Nations. Unlike Libya, where they got UN approval to go in, this time they've got a problem with China and Russia on the Security Council.
Exactly. Both the Chinese and the Russians aren't too big about us knocking off their ally. Man, who could blame them? You're a superpower. You want hegemony. We want hegemony. So it's like if you have two gangs meeting on the block and one gang knocks another gang member's teeth out. They're going to want some kind of retribution, and it's a turf war in essence. And the poor Iranians, the poor Syrians, just happen to be the two folks living on that block.
Well, you mentioned Iran. When General Wesley Clark talked about seeing a memo back in 2001 in which the Defense Secretary listed all these countries on a hit list. There's like 7 or 8 countries, including Syria. And the final country, the most important, the one with the largest energy reserves in the world, is Iran. Does the United States, NATO, need to take out Syria before conquering Iran?
I think there are two different schools of thought. The Israelis figure, well, we'll bomb Iran, we'll keep the American army between us and the Iranians, the Americans will destroy them piecemeal, and then we'll take on the Syrians, just by more or less helping along the so-called rebels, and they feel that they can fight what is fundamentally a three-front war, because let's not forget, they're also going to be fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Lebanese army, which Iran has agreed now to supply. So that's the Israeli school of thought. The American school of thought is our doctrine says we don't enter a battle unless we have a 10-to-1 advantage. Well, fighting on two fronts negates any military advantage we have. We do not like the idea of having an Iranian and by extension Russian army to our rear. The difference is the American military is not as arrogant as the Israelis. The Israelis seriously believe that the Arabs are inferior and therefore can be, destroyed piecemeal.
And this may not be.
Whereas we realize that's not the case.
And they're also not quite so concerned with the strategy of having a big enemy at the United States rear when using Iraq as a jumping off point. We would have not only we would have the Iraqis at our back, in addition the Afghanis, and we would be entrapped completely. I mean, Pakistan comes into the picture. You've got
the U.S. forces invariably in Afghanistan will be surrounded
because we only have hostages, right?
Well, yeah, because we only have one ground supply route into Afghanistan, which runs through southern Russia. And the Russians said, Putin and Medvedev said they would close that supply route if a war broke out with Iran. So now, just grasping for a minute, if they close that supply route, everything that goes through that gets supplied to our troops in Afghanistan on the ground, food, uniforms, and non-sensitive items, all of the essential items, fuel for the helicopters, jets, and et cetera, all come on the roads. So if those roads get shut down, now you have to bring in men, food, ammunition, fuel, clothing, and all the other essentials for life by aircraft. And I would just like to point out that the last several armies that tried to do that, the end result was Dien Bien Phu and Stalingrad.
I'd like to point out that Marchand has just put on our website in context on the YouTube a history of the wars in Afghanistan, which is very instructive because our situation there is very reminiscent of the British in the 19th century.
And it's funny, no matter how far technology comes, we still run into the same supply line problems as we did 100 years ago.
It's an easy country to invade, to seeming to conquer, but to occupy it, it's a disaster. For 2,000 years, it's been an impossible task.
Well, you may as well be occupying the moon at this point. I mean,
exactly.
It's rocky, it's mountainous, it's unsafe to pass most of the roads.
Very hostile terrain, very hostile climate. And then, of course, the people are fighters. And we live in this fantasy world, and I think a lot of it's thanks to the Hollywood industry, films like The Bourne Identity, The Bourne Supremacy. We have satellites that can watch you taking a leak. I mean, it's special agents all around the world that are capturing these high-profile terrorists. When in reality, there is no substitute on the planet for having boots on the ground. At the end of the day.
Or else why would we have these drones? People think, whoa, we've got satellites. We don't need drones. Well, we wouldn't be using them if we didn't.
Exactly. And drones are just compensating for the lack of manpower.
Let me ask you, Marshall, what would the conquest of Iran look like?
Well, I think we're not planning on a protracted ground war. The idea, and again, this breaks down into American and Israeli arrogance, sheer astronomical arrogance, is that we believe that we will bomb the Iranians into submission, a week of bombing, and they will crumble, they will buckle, they will, shock and awe. And we don't account for the fact that, the last time we were shocked and awe on the Libyans and on the Iraqis.
It worked, right?
It worked because they were fighting us with World War II weapons. But Iran has Russian S-300 surface-to-air missiles. They have the Qatar aircraft carrier killer missiles. They have a 7 million man army that's actually trained, and not only trained, but has very high morale. So, I mean, you're looking at a very serious possibility that if we fly jets into Iran, they might actually shoot down our aircraft.
How infantile is that shock and awe campaign, though? I mean, that's like you go to Disneyland for fireworks or something. They were like, shock and awe, something that you idiot population can understand. You'll get this. Tune into TV primetime, and you'll be able to watch Iraq be reduced to cinders.
It's something we love. It's
right?
It's something, we love because it's, in the first Gulf War, the first televised war, bombings, it makes people feel powerful, feel in charge.
But now the rationale for invading Iran is that they're becoming a nuclear power and they're a rogue state and all this stuff. But our own intelligence just reported that we have no evidence that they're actually producing a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, we have the article right here, New York Times. U.S. agencies see no move by Iran to build a bomb. What are we supposed to take from this?
Well, I mean, the fact is that the Grand Ayatollah Khomeini in, not to be confused with Khomeini, but Khomeini in, I know, bear with me here, friends. It gets worse. But, it's the fact is he outlawed nuclear weapons. He said that, nuclear weapons...
Fatah?
Fatwa, Islamic ruling. Okay. He said that there's it's forbidden in Islam because it kills large numbers of unarmed innocent people.
And it also the radiation point was a big one because it leaves the land infertile, right?
Exactly.
Something like that.
And again, it causes unnecessary human suffering. And so. And fundamentally, Iran has no use for a nuclear bomb. That's from a religious perspective, and from a strategic perspective, a bomb is absolutely pointless. They're like, it's for the infantile mind. Iran is going to drop a bomb on Israel, wipe them off the face of the earth. Folks, do you have any idea how small the Middle East is?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to use nukes, and that's like using grenades in a closet.
Exactly.
But Israel was putting out reports that they were 8 months away from producing. That Iran was something like 8 months away from producing.
Well, yeah, and I think though a lot of this is I think both sides are making stuff up. To be honest, I think on the one hand you have the Israelis who, for their public consumption and for international consumption, are saying Iran has the bomb, they're going to nuke us, help, and then on the other. We don't really, I think, want a war with Iran. Right now, we want to take out Syria first, so we're kind of glad to say, it looks like they're not as far along as we thought. But I think the most important thing is that we're trying to play the reluctant partner right now. We're trying to say, we don't really want a war, but then when war breaks out, we'll tell the American people, see, we tried to not intervene.
Well, do you think that there's a real conflict going on within our government between, let's say, military expansionists who are civilians and the guys in uniform who really know what a disaster an attack on Iran would lead to?
I don't fundamentally think so, because we got rid of any general that spoke out, whether it was McChrystal or Casey or Petraeus, to whatever minor extent in many cases they spoke out. They were either promoted out or relieved. It was, that's it, you're done. And they bring in people like Dempsey who've never held a combat command in their entire lives.
Right.
O'Denero, who the heck's he? And they bring these people in, a bunch of yes men. And we see a parallel here because this happened during World War II. What was the first thing Hitler did? Hitler got rid of all of his able generals, men like Guderian, Manstein, von Rundstedt, and then, of course, had Rommel commit suicide. And he brought in people like Keitel and Jodl, and these generals were yes men.
Yeah.
They would just say, yes, sir, yes, sir. And, there was a report before the Battle of Kursk. Von Manstein received a report saying the Russians have 2,000 fighters, and they'll destroy our army on the ground. And Goring said, "Oh, that's absurd. The Luftwaffe, will destroy them. They have nothing. They're all a bunch of fakes, basically decoys."
Yeah.
And of course, von Manstein knew this was. He knew they had 2,000 fighters. Moreover, Keitel knew they had 2,000 fighters, but Keitel told Hitler, the air marshal is right. They were all decoys, even though he knew better because he was a yes man. And that's the same thing you see. So I feel like this is very calculated. They're
or miscalculated, as the
or
case may be.
miscalculated. But I mean, the way what they're saying by pretending to say, we don't think this is the right time. I think a lot of that's for public consumption.
Now, before you run out of time, can you quickly explain what the article from Debka about the upgrading the Syrian electronics is about?
Oh yes, this is an early warning system that the Russians have installed. It's early warning system monitoring. Basically, what it allows the Russians to do is notify the Iranians and the Syrians of all U.S. and Israeli and NATO troop movements, along with the fact that the Russians have satellites that can send down imagery, global
rivaling
positioning imagery.
our space technology. So they
Exactly.
have the exact same kind of stuff that we have to be able to monitor movements and so forth.
Exactly. So every move we make, a U.S. soldier doesn't sneeze in the world, the Russians can't see it. And so all of these troop movements that we're doing around Syria and around Iran are now visible, and that's one of the significance of installing this, meaning if we decide to attack Syria or we decide to attack Iran, the Russians are going to know. Then the Kremlin's going to tell the Syrians or the Iranians, and we're going to be met with a real... it's like opening a door thinking you're going to surprise somebody, you get punched in the nose.
So is this a satellite-based system?
Well, this particular system is, I believe, ground-based.
It's ground-based. Because then they're protected in case we do go to war. We can take out their satellite. They still have...
Exactly.
Technology that can protect them.
They also have invested very heavily, along with the Chinese, in satellite countermeasures. If anything, they could take out our satellites before we could take out theirs.
That's comforting.
Yeah, literally, just blind the entire... Because fundamentally...
Which just shows that this war is ill-advised. We really shouldn't be getting involved in any more wars whatsoever.
Exactly.
We can't afford it. We can't afford the human loss of life, the destruction of the infrastructure, the destruction it would cause to the civilians, the innocent civilians that are caught in the crossfire. And I think we're going to have to call it a show here and sign off here. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, In Context Report, and visit us at the website, incontextreport.com, and find us on Facebook. All right, we'll have to see you next time.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.